gentle marketers. Welcome back to episode 68 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. As always, I'm Sarah Croce, I'm the host here, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer, so that's someone who's working in an organization who does business for good. Today's episode falls under the P of personal power. If you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of the Gentle Marketing Mandala. And if you're new here, welcome. And maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download your one-page marketing plan with the Gentle Marketing version of the 7 Ps of marketing at sarahsanacroce.com/one page. That's the number 1 and then page. It comes with 7 email prompts to really help you reflect on these different Ps. So gentle marketing could really also be called holistic marketing. So really bringing your true self to everything you do, coming from that wholeness. And I feel like a healthy lifestyle belongs to being authentic. I can't really explain it, but it just feels wrong to treat your body with bad food and then expect to be able to be the best version of yourself. So even if maybe you're thinking, what does Ayurveda and eating have to do with running a business? Bear with me. Maybe just open up to curiosity. Personally, I've been following my curiosity and started reading many books and articles about Ayurveda and Ayurvedic lifestyle. And it really has been a life changer to, for example, realize that raw food is not really my thing. And it's weird because we are basically taught that eating raw vegetables is good for you, right? That's healthy. But it turns out that, for really living your best life, maybe if you're constantly bloated or have stomach problems, well, then maybe raw food is not ideal for you. So that's just one of the things that I've discovered by kind of digging deeper into Ayurveda. So today I'm bringing you Angela Perger, who is a certified Ayurvedic chef and host of the delightful the Simple Ayurveda podcast, to join me for this conversation. So Angela is a certified Ayurvedic chef, Ayurveda health counselor, yoga teacher, and mother of 2. She hosts the Simple Ayurveda podcast where she discusses Ayurveda, motherhood, and minimalism. She has a Master of Science in Education and has been practicing yoga since 2007. She uses yoga and Ayurveda to thrive despite diagnoses of ulcerative colitis, hypothyroidism. Sorry about these words, they're always a bit challenging for me, and a rare autoimmune liver condition. Her goal is to share these ancient sciences in simple, everyday ways so that you can be your happiest, healthiest self. So I say we dive in. Here's my conversation with Angela. Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. As I kind of mentioned to you offline, I very recently got into Ayurveda and then I was looking for podcasts and I found yours and I just loved I don't know if you've been told that before, this authentic being, right? People sometimes tell me that and I'm like, well, all I'm doing is being myself. So I don't know if I'm doing anything specific, but that's what it felt like to me on your podcast. It just felt like, oh, she's just a human being, She's not like this Ayurvedic guru that I feel kind of inferior when I'm listening. So thank you for that.
I am so happy to hear that because it's kind of exactly why I even started a podcast to begin with. Is as I was learning Ayurveda, I was a little bit intimidated and confused. So once I started formally studying and getting a better grasp of it, I felt like I just need to share this in a way that's super easy to understand, because at its very essence, it's all about connection with nature, and all human beings, that's our natural way of being.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And we'll definitely get into some of the specifics, because you're right. It can feel overwhelming or just kind of like, I don't get it. It's very complex, but in the end, I think you said it well. It's just about the connection to nature, and also really connection to trusting what your body is telling you. That's what I realized for myself. But yeah, I want to go right into it. But first, maybe you can tell people a bit how you got into Ayurveda, how you became passionate about it.
Sure. So I first learned about Ayurveda about 10 years ago during a yoga teacher training. And I thought it was interesting. And I even went and got a consultation, but I was still pretty confused. And so there is an art and a science to Ayurveda. And just like if you don't click with your first business coach or your first yoga teacher, having it explained in different ways is always helpful, and like finding the right person that you connect with. So I'll just throw that out there. But meanwhile, I was diagnosed with some pretty heavy medical conditions when I was 21, ulcerative colitis, primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is a liver autoimmune condition that's really rare. And so over the years, I've dug into alternative health protocols and different diets and things like that, meanwhile still seeing a regular Western doctor. And so that quest for feeling better naturally led me through a windy path of all different styles of healing until I finally landed on Ayurveda. And she's sort of like the divine mother of all wellness systems, which is why when you first come across Ayurveda, it seems a little complex and confusing. But then as we peel back the layers, it's actually the very essence of it, like I said, is pretty simple. And so I've used Ayurveda in my own life to heal from those autoimmune conditions. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. When you hear those kind of real life stories where actual healing has taken place, it's just like, wow, I need to know more about this, right? When I think about Ayurveda over here, at least, it's not, it's not like yoga, definitely. Most people have heard about yoga and a lot of people are, practicing yoga now, at least I would say, among the listeners, I'm sure there's a good percentage who are taking some yoga classes. However, Ayurveda is kind of, they heard of it, but maybe they oftentimes, and that was my case as well, it's kind of like, oh, it's that massage thing. So that's usually the first thing that people have maybe heard of, is like this oil massage. So maybe give us, without going too much into all the details, but give us kind of an overview about the different aspects of Ayurveda.
Sure. So Ayurveda and yoga are sister sciences. There's another science that goes along with Ayurveda and yoga, that's Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology. And from the Vedic perspective, yoga is actually the spiritual aspect, and Ayurveda has more to do with the mind-body. So Ayurveda the word means knowledge or wisdom of life. And it's basically, you could look at it like a handbook for being a human being. There's a couple of different ancient texts that give us the information, but it breaks down life as mind, body, soul, and the senses. And so the main healing components for Ayurveda are diet and lifestyle, but there's not just one diet. So whenever there are food lists or things like that, those are kind of like tools, but there's not just one way for everyone to eat, because Ayurveda is really based on the individual person. So each one of us has our own unique karmas, our own unique energies that we're born with. And the more that we understand ourselves, then the more we're able to make these diet and lifestyle choices that support who we are as an individual. So that's kind of what it is. So, and if I had to like summarize it, I like to say that it's diet and lifestyle that flows with the rhythms of nature, because it's all based on the 5 elements. And things from nature. So basically human beings, we're part of nature. And so those 5 elements are earth, water, fire, wind, and space or ether. And then those 5 elements come together to form the 3 doshas, which some of you have heard of, those being Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And so in Ayurveda, we learn that we each have this unique makeup of those 3 doshas within us that's based on the elements. So for example, like someone could be a little more earthy in nature, or someone could be a little more fiery in nature, or a little more airy in nature. And then we just sort of use that to help figure out what sort of diet and lifestyle would be beneficial for that individual.
Ooh, wow, you just covered a lot of ground there. So I think already it'd be worth repeating the 5 elements, and then from there, maybe going into the doshas and kind of saying which element fits into which dosha. And just for listeners, if this is your very first time hearing about Ayurveda, again, think of it. That's how I first think of it and thought of it. And you tell me, Angela, if that's maybe not the ideal way to think of it. But for me, in gentle marketing, we do a lot of personality tests under the P of personal power. And they just kind of help us find out more about who we are. You know, I'm thinking the Myers-Briggs personality test, whether you're introverted or extroverted. Thinking of, we talk about, I have a blank right now, human design. So there's always types in there as well. Enneagrams, so all these different kind of personality types. And that's how I first thought about the doshas. I was like, oh, okay. So human beings, there's, you know, what history or what these Indians way back found out is that there's 3 different types of people, and that's what the doshas really are. And so these doshas are then kind of made up of different elements. Does that sound at all like, you know?
Yes. And just like with those, well, some of those tests give you like a definite answer, and then some of them there's like a gray space. So I would
say all of them are kind of like, oh yeah, that's an indication, but then you need to go deeper. Yeah.
I think about the doshas sort of like archetypes. Yeah. Like none of us are 100% any one thing. Yeah. So they just sort of like light up patterns and tendencies for us to be aware of in ourselves. So I'll explain a little bit more so that listeners can start to recognize the different doshas within you. Mm-hmm. And so the 5 elements are earth, water, fire, air or wind, and ether or empty space. And so the basic premise of Ayurveda is that all things in nature are made up of these elements, including different foods and herbs and things like that, because those are things that grow in nature, and human beings. And so from there, those 5 elements come together with the 3 vital energies, which are known as the doshas. So this is where we have the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So the first one, I'll start at the base, right? Earth and water form together to make Kapha dosha. So what this looks like in a human being is someone that has a lot of earth and water energy, means they hold onto nutrients very easily. So that means that maybe they don't have to eat as much, but they hold on to weight more, or they have thicker bone size and just a denser body tissues. There's thick hair, there's oilier skin, rounder features, just like earth energy. And so in personality, the tendency here is to be, when things are balanced, like more easygoing and very lovable and content. They're like that earth energy. They're not in a rush to get anywhere. And like when water's in flow, you know, like letting things roll off the back, not being easily irritated. So in a personality type situation, you know, like Kaphas are said to make great office managers. You know, they're very stable. Like they do great when they have set schedules and things like that. Those are not challenges. So then for Kaphas, the challenge more is to create movement in life. So therefore, Kaphas really do have to move their bodies every day to feel well. And then, they might benefit from different sorts of exercise that are outside of their comfort zone, or, friends that kind of push them a little bit to like leave the comfort zone and maybe go and do things because they might not do it as much on their own because they're sort of just content. So there's like always a fine dance with balance versus being out of balance. But in general, that's sort of the Kapha archetype. I think, a really good example is someone like Oprah. She's a great listener. She really cares about people.
They sound like your ideal best friend, the Kaphas.
Yes, I'm not a Kapha, and I do love my Kapha friends. I need them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the ancient texts do say like Kaphas make great parents. It's like that loving energy. Not that the other dosha types don't have that. It's just it comes more natural to the Kaphas.
Right.
And out of balance could be stuck energy, like really stuck in the past and not wanting things to change. So that our stubbornness could be out of balance. And so then the next type is Pitta, which is mostly fire with a little bit of water. Pitta is all about transformation and conversion. And so these are the leaders. These are people that are teachers, politicians, lawyers, really good at arguing, always have to be right, probably pretty organized, directing people, have a lot of fire. And so when that's in balance, they shine bright and others look to them for guidance and sort of direction. And when it's out of balance, this is where we could start to look at things happening in the body, too much redness, inflammation, things like acid reflux, getting angered, irritated easily. And so the Pitta body type is sort of just medium build. What happens though is I think like I got confused because I was never great at sports. And so I thought, how could I be a Pitta if I am not good at sports? But Pitta can manifest in people in different ways. You could be a bookworm and be a Pitta because you're really interested in knowledge and, writing reports or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily mean that like you're amazing at sports. It can be, but most athletes will have a lot of Pitta in them just because that fiery nature.
It's that kind of also ego-driven competitiveness, no?
Yes, which can also manifest in different ways. So like I'm a Pitta type primarily, but I didn't see it at first because I thought I don't really like competitions and things like that. But it can also be like self-competition, like if you compare yourself often or you want to have the perfect house or the perfect job or whatever, like when you have like these expectations, that's sort of like a lot of that Pitta energy gone awry.
Yeah. I want to just bring in my example as well, because I did a session recently. And so again, you talked about these imbalances, right? So I think there's a natural state, and I forget the Sanskrit word.
Yeah.
Prakriti is your natural state, and then the imbalanced state is
Vikriti.
Vikriti, yes. And so what came out for me is that originally my natural state would be Pitta Vata, so both together somehow. So I guess there's like a hybrid type, maybe.
Yes. There's we all have all three within us. So None of us are 100% any of them.
Okay. Yeah. So I was kind of the hybrid between Pitta and Vata. And then the imbalanced state, which I'm in now, is more Vata Pitta. So I think she said I have too much Vata. And so the natural state of Pitta kind of gets impacted by the too much Vata. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's super common. And that's actually what happens with me as well. I'm also a Pitta Vata, but the Vata is what gets out of balance easier.
Right.
But I'll explain that because that's kind of the case for everyone, that Vata is the one that's first to go out of balance.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So let's get.
So then the last type of person is the Vata person. When we're talking about just the three archetypes. And the Vata type of person has a lot of wind and space energy. So, they have ideas that go all over the place, but they tend not to be as grounded. So this type of person likes to travel a lot, move a lot, have random schedule, just kind of like do things to the beat of their own drum. And the Vata person will either usually be petite or they could be really tall with long limbs. It's like the nutrients in the body are just like really traveling. And so this body type tends to be thinner. And this person, like I said, they're creative. They kind of like do things their own way. So for example, like some like artists and graphic designers and things like that, jobs like that, usually Vata types are drawn to. Mm-hmm. So like you mentioned, none of us are just one. We have all three within us, and we're born with a certain ratio of all three. So just, it's not like there's numbers in the cosmos, but just so our human brains can wrap ourselves around it. Like, let's say I was, 50% Pitta, 30% Vata, and 20% Kapha. And that would show up in different ways. So there's always going to be a little bit of Kapha in me. There's always going to be some Vata, and the majority when it comes to body type and like the way I think being Pitta. So that's what the Prakriti is. It's also called your constitution. So that's the sort of like the ratio of what you were born with. And then as we live life, that can be swayed. So the point is with the whole understanding your constitution, which takes time. Like I said, I went to a practitioner 10 years ago, and she told me I was equal in all three. So, and that's not true. It's like there's an art and a science in seeing people through different lenses. And it took a couple years later for me to really unpack this Pitta thing, because I didn't see myself as sporty and competitive. However, I have like a couple different degrees, and I always have my nose in a book and things like that. So that's very Pitta, like the quest for knowledge. So it just shows up in a different way.
Right.
But so we have what we're born with, and then we have what's happening in our life right now. And we live in a society with a lot of Vata energy, because Vata being air and space is like endless possibilities, like anything goes. So this is like the World Wide Web, right? You get on to check an email and 2 hours go by and you ordered something and you're menu planning, and it's like there's no end to what you could be looking up. Mm-hmm. And so that when we don't rein it in, it creates like that wind just blowing in all different directions. And when we do it with our internet time, and then we have our phones with us and we're doing it with our phones, and then we also kind of start to do it with, like, let's say plans and being all over the place and trying to multitask. And then we're also doing it with our foods, like not being consistent with the time that we eat and things like that. It just starts to create this chaotic energy within us. And so that's Vata is the one of the doshas, the one that gets out of balance easiest because it has the most mobile quality. And then on top of that, it's like all of these lifestyle factors. It's just easy to push out. But the nice thing is it's easier to rein in. And so, yeah, that's what happened with you. And that's also what happened with me. And that's what happens with a lot of people.
I see while you're saying that now. It's a generational, a societal thing more than a personality thing. It's like, well, if I would have lived 100 years ago, then maybe another one of the doshas would have gotten out of balance. But given our society and the endless opportunities, it's Vata that, kind of takes over the easiest, right?
Yeah. I mean, in general, the texts say like Vata is the easiest to go out of balance. But like, okay. For example, one of my teachers has been practicing Ayurveda for 30 years. And she said in the 70s, half the people that she talked to would have Vata imbalance. Now, pretty much every single person has Vata imbalance.
Wow. So there has been an increase. Yeah. Okay. So we know the doshas. I think from there to then make the bridge to lifestyle and nutrition, and kind of, again, bridging it to, maybe even our business, because this is a business podcast. It's a podcast about marketing. So why the heck am I bringing on a specialist for Ayurveda? It's that bridge that I'd love to talk about, how this all plays together, and how what we eat kind of has an impact on how we feel and then, how we do marketing or how we do business.
Yes. So in Ayurveda, one of the main foundational principles to understand is super simple. It's like attracts like, and opposites create balance. So for everyone listening, you don't have to understand your full constitution right away. You can just start to look at your everyday life and how you feel to recognize, is there excess earth energy? So that would look like feeling lethargic, getting a late start, not wanting to move your body, not really feel like doing anything, right? That's like a lot of heavy earth energy. And so if that were the case, the opposite is going to bring balance. So forcing yourself out of bed and getting moving in the morning. So like going for a brisk walk or doing some kind of exercise before you start your workday. Eating lighter foods in general. So those are the things that are, going to get that energy moving. And then if Pitta is out of balance, and again, it doesn't mean that you're a Pitta type. You could be, you could not be, because we also live in a very Pitta-driven world. So if you feel like a lot of deadlines and like trying to get work done and, taking on too much, that's going to drive up Pitta, right? It's a lot of fire. You're putting heat to yourself. And so if the heat feels on, then the opposite quality through diet and lifestyle is going to help to create balance for you as an individual when Pitta is high. And so that looks like scheduling space in your day. It looks like eating foods that are a little bit simpler, because just at the very core of understanding that when we have a lot of fire and we're inflamed, then spicy tacos are just going to kind of like aggravate to that. And the top Pitta aggravators are refined sugar, alcohol, caffeine, and competitive activities. So for example, if you're working and your eyes are bulging out because you're like working so much, like Pitta's super high, we've all been there, then signing up to do a marathon is just going to create more Pitta energy.
That's so interesting, because I think, I just kind of naturally realized over time that running for me was not going to be my favorite exercise anymore. And one could blame it on age, but, I could still run. I felt good after, running. It's not like my knees hurt or anything. It wasn't physical pain. But I realized that I was just even more excited and more kind of like, on speed, rather than some people, they tell you, oh, I feel great. I feel like I emptied everything after this run. And for me, it was the opposite. I couldn't sleep if I would go running at night. And so I realized, actually, I think for me, it's going to be walking and not running. And that was way before I actually, found out about Ayurveda. But somehow your body, if you really listen, I think it actually tells you these, truths.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, because that's exactly what Ayurveda is. And it's also catered to the individual. So there might be someone else that has Pitta in nature that has to burn that energy off in some way, or else they go crazy.
Right.
But for you to recognize that this is actually creating like attracts like, it's creating more of that energy. It's so beautiful, and exactly the way that we all can tune into our bodies to get that wisdom from within.
Right. Yeah. What are some other example of like attracts like and opposites create balance?
So for the last type, for Vata, that's that air and wind energy. And so like I mentioned before, that's like multitasking. And so basically Vata has this quality of mobility and trying to do a million things at once and getting distracted and not finishing things. And so the more that we do that, the more that creates that space in the mind. And then when we rein that in and choose, for me, like, for example, being an entrepreneur and working from home right now, it looks like time blocking. It looks like setting boundaries on time on social media or time checking emails and trying to stick to only checking them at certain times of the day so that my energy isn't all over the place every time I open my computer to do something. Instead, I want to focus in on one task at a time, or one, like I try to do clients together in the afternoons. I try to do something else at a different time. And that way it's like that energy isn't just all over the place all of the time.
Yeah, that's a great example for, it's more than just lifestyle and nutrition. Again, it really impacts how we organize our workday. And depending on your dosha, maybe, doing little bits and pieces here and there really works for you, but maybe you're better off just blocking a whole day and getting all your podcast recording done in that one day.
Yeah, that's a perfect example for something that happened in my life. As I started the podcast, I think it was about 2 years ago, I would just record an episode like whenever a thought popped into my head. And then later I'd have to go and create the graphics and the show notes. And as you know, there's so many pieces to it.
Right.
And it's like, I could be working on one episode all week with all these different pieces. And so for sustainability and to be able to publish something once a week, I had to sit down and come up with like what's going to be the theme for the month or the content, and get organized and record and then do all the show notes and put things into time blocks. Because my groundedness was not there, having all these little tiny tasks all of the time.
Yeah, it was like too much Vata all over the place. So interesting. I think I want to go a bit more into nutrition as well. So I'm not a big fan of, these diets where they tell you, oh, all you should be eating is meat, or on the other hand, oh, you should becoming a vegan. And they're very strict, it seems like, almost all the time. They're like, all these kind of fad diets are like very, very strict, and there's just certain things that you can eat. What I love about Ayurveda is where there are some recommendations. It doesn't feel as strict. It's just kind of like when my Ayurvedic consultant gave me the list of foods, I was like, that's interesting. Those are exactly the foods that I'm liking already. And the ones that she kind of didn't recommend were exactly the ones I actually didn't enjoy. So again, to me, it was like proof that my body kind of already knew what was good for me, and stayed away from things that were not good, except for coffee. I'm still a big coffee drink. Well, not big, but I have my 2 coffees a day. But yeah, what would you say about these recommendations? How, again, maybe you can kind of just give us some guidelines. For me, what was eye-opening was the hot food versus cold food. So why don't you explain that?
Yes. So for now, I think when you're first learning about food in Ayurveda, it's kind of nice just to put the doshas aside.
Yeah.
Because when we look at food, you can look at the doshas and those energies, but you can also just look at food from a digestive perspective. And I find that is the easiest thing to work with, and what brings about healing in simple, sustainable ways. So Agni is the digestive fire in Ayurveda. And it is like the basis for everything, because when our Agni doesn't function, then it wreaks havoc in the body. And it's really responsible for, so basically illness and disease is created from Agni not functioning and then from doshic imbalance. Mm-hmm. So the digestive system, if you think about that, it's a fire. One of the main things to think about is that we want to keep the fire kindled, but we don't want it blazing out of control, and we don't want to dull it too much. We just want to keep it sort of like at a nice, even, sustainable type of energy. And so when we drink icy foods, like a frozen smoothie, or cold foods, it's kind of like throwing ice on the fire, and it creates a little bit of constriction in the digestive tract. So, when you drink something cold, you kind of can feel that. I really feel it. My digestive system is pretty sensitive. So once in a while, I'll have something cold if I'm out and about. And it's like that contracting feeling. It just makes everything harder to digest for the body. So that's why room temperature or warm foods and warm drinks and room temperature drinks are recommended.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because my husband is Canadian, I'm Swiss, and he kind of installed this habit of always having ice with his drinks. And I'm like, why? What's with this silly habit? And to me, it just didn't, like, I didn't need it. I didn't need ice cold water with my food, especially all the time. And so now that I've learned this thing about Ayurveda, I keep telling him, you're killing your Agni. He's like, whatever. But eventually I'll turn him around and go back to not warm drinks, but yeah, what's wrong with just, tap water that comes out at least not at a frozen temperature, right?
Yeah. You bring up a great point, though. My husband doesn't follow Ayurveda either. He eats the food that I make, but what he does on his own, he's got his own mind. So,
yeah, it's definitely interesting and wanting to eat a certain way, and then having, I have 2 teenagers. They're definitely not interested in Ayurveda. So what I kind of decided is like, well, I'm going to make regular food, maybe. And that's another one that we can talk about is maybe what I'll do is just I'll add kind of more specific spices to my portions. And actually the spices, they don't mind so much either. So that, I think the Indian cuisine cooks a lot with spices because I guess they also help the Agni, right?
Yes. So the basic idea is that spices are warming, depending on which spice. Of course, some are a lot more warming. So when we cook the food with the spices help to kindle Agni. It's really important, I think, to know that Ayurveda comes from India, but you can take the principles of Ayurvedic cooking and you can make other types of cuisine. So a basic foundation for eating Ayurvedically is called the balance bowl. And the components are a whole grain. Basmati rice is traditionally the easiest to digest. So I just eat a lot of basmati rice because the kids like it and it's easy. But, there's a whole world of whole grains out there, from amaranth to barley to buckwheat to quinoa to polenta, all of those things.
Right.
And then a bean or a legume. Split mung are the most easy to digest. So when there's digestive issues, that's the one. Lentils and smaller beans are generally easier to digest. So chickpea and smaller.
Right.
And then the other 2 pieces of the bowl are a grounding vegetable. So something that is dense and more from the dirt, like a sweet potato, a zucchini, butternut squash, beets, parsnips, like all of those things that are just dense and grounding. And then the 4th part of this basic balance bowl is a leafy green or cruciferous vegetable, something that we consider detoxing. So, it could be like purple cabbage or cauliflower or Brussels sprouts or something like that. So with this foundation of having a grain, a legume, a grounding vegetable, and a detox veggie, you kind of get everything that Ayurveda suggests, but in a very easy way. And from here, you could see how you could really just modify this. Like if your family wants to eat meat, then you could just sub out the bean and have chicken or fish with that bowl instead. Or, you want to make it Mexican style, which we do a lot at my house. I have a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they love taco night. So I'll make, like basmati rice and black beans, and then guacamole as our grounding veggie, because avocados are very dense and grounding. Mm-hmm. And then, like cabbage slaw could be that extractive veggie. And then the kids, I'll give them like, cheese and nacho chips and stuff with it so that they enjoy it and they eat it happily. So that's how we could take like this idea of Ayurvedic eating and just modify and make it real for your family.
Yeah, I love that flexibility of not having to stick to a certain like regime. Right. So that's great. I want to kind of, before we wrap it up, bring him back to business, and you're running a business. You have your Simple Ayurveda podcast. You have a program, and so how would you say that living this Ayurvedic lifestyle impacts your business and your kind of daily routines? How does it help you, being able to do all of that while raising 2 kids?
When I first jumped into eating Ayurvedically and setting a daily rhythm and a routine, I did it to heal my digestive system.
Right.
But my daughter was a breastfeeding baby. My son was 4 and doing homeschool preschool at the time. And what I found by eating this way and having a daily rhythm was that I ended up having so much more energy. That was like the surprise bonus of Ayurveda that I did not see coming, because I just went into it with the digestive system in mind. But I ended up, realizing that I had so much more energy. So I feel like when we feel well, when we naturally wake up with the sun, like I don't use an alarm clock and I wake up, at 6 or whatever around that time, which is a recommendation in Ayurveda, is to wake up with the sun, just because we're, the more that we live in sync with the nature, then the more we're not fighting these rhythms that are naturally happening in our body. So for me, part of it is having that daily routine and just eating at set times so that my digestive system is functioning optimally and I'm feeling well. So I have the energy and I get excited about working on Ayurveda stuff and, doing all of the things that go along with running a business. So there's that part. And then the other part, I think, is the more that we understand ourselves, like you said, like in business and marketing, when you take those personality tests and when you get consultations from different people that kind of like lay out the things they see about you, then the more we create business and work that's in alignment with who we actually are.
Mm.
So for me, through understanding my tendencies and my habits, then I'm able to like pick projects and sort of guide my business in the direction that is in flow with who I am, rather than trying to fight it and do what other people are doing or swim against the current.
I love that so much. Yes, totally. I really believe that it's everything you can do to find out more about who you are will help you in business in some way, even if that means finding out what food is best for you. Like, it seems kind of like so abstract and far-fetched, but it's true. It's true that it will give you more energy, and B, you will, like you said so beautifully, you'll learn more about who you are and then attract or resonate with your ideal clients.
Right. And so, on my podcast, like I will share things that are really personal, or, when I mess up and when I fall off the bandwagon in Ayurveda, and yet that attracts the ideal client because they know like, I will see them for who they are, and I'm not going to judge them for when they fall off, the so-called path.
Exactly. It doesn't feel like I told you in the beginning, it doesn't feel like, oh, she's the perfect guru who has it all figured out, and here I am, struggling with this. So it feels like we're on the same level. Like like I say, the customer doesn't want to be king anymore. I want to be on the same level as you and really feel included in your journey as well. What would be one thing that you would tell listeners who, before this episode have never heard of Ayurveda? What would you tell them? Where should they start if they're interested in, finding out more? Or, well, obviously you're going to share your website, but kind of like we didn't really talk about routines, but that's a big part of the lifestyle aspect. So maybe besides getting up before the sun rises, what would be like one other routine that they could, easily implement into their day?
I feel like if you're not doing it already, having windows of time when you eat is super helpful, because not only does it calm Vata dosha, because the body doesn't, when we just eat at random times, the body doesn't understand or know when the food is coming. So then it kind of is in panic or stress mode. So when we eat at set times, the body gets into a rhythm of understanding like food's coming at this time, we can relax, we don't have to go into starvation mode. And then also when we eat at set times, the digestive system begins to expect that, and it starts to secrete saliva before we eat. And it's like everything is just flowing and working optimally. And so I just want to share real quick, in my own life, for example, lunch is usually between 11 and 1. So I'm not saying that you have to eat exactly at 12:15 on the dot every day. That's not realistic for many of us. But to have that window of time so that I try to eat close to noon as possible. But if it's an hour before or an hour after once in a while, then that's a, you know. So if you work from home and you haven't created yet some sort of set time to eat, which, believe it or not, I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that don't schedule themselves lunch. So this is common. Eating lunch at the set time. And then, you know, like for me, breakfast is between 7 and 8 and dinner is between 5 and 7. Like sometimes I'm eating with the kids at 5. Sometimes it's date night and we have a sitter, then we're eating closer to 7 by the time we get our food. So just having like those, that creates a structure for my day. And then, you know, from there, there's going to be different things happening in the morning or the afternoon. So if you're brand new to having a rhythm or a structure, I feel like lunch is a great place to start because it's that anchor in the middle of the day. And then the other two sort of fall into place.
Yeah. And I would add to that. And again, I think I heard that on your podcast is not eating in front of your computer, right? But actually having maybe also a space where you eat. Like, is it in your kitchen? Is it on the terrace? Is it, you know, but not while you're working.
Yes. And the main reason, I think it's important to understand why so that we actually do it. Because I know before I understood why, I definitely ate in front of my laptop all the time. And basically our Agni, our digestive fire, it helps us to digest the food and drink that we consume, but it also helps us to digest information. So if we're actively working or even watching TV, it's like our mind is processing things and our stomach is processing things. So the energy is being split. It's like part of the energy is processing the food and part of the energy is processing, you know, that media that we're taking in. And so we're not giving all of the energy to the digestive tract. And over time, that can start to cause depletion in it, basically.
Yeah. So I guess that applies to watching TV as well.
Yeah, it's ideal if we just kind of like, it's nice to sit outside or by a window if that's an option, you know, just to like, and focus on chewing and enjoying each bite and feeling grateful for the vegetables and for the earth and the farmer and like all of the people that made it possible for us to have this food. And, you know, this doesn't have to be a big, long thing. I mean, lunch, if you just carve out like 15 or 20 minutes in the middle of your day to eat.
Yeah, it's not like a 3-course meal.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I eat like very simple meals for lunch, usually like a soup or a rice bowl or whatever, and just try to eat it in peace and take that time off, you know, from thinking too much.
That's great. Please do share where people can find out more about you and where they find your podcast and all of that.
Thank you. My website is simpleayurveda.com. And the Simple Ayurveda podcast is on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. And it's also on the website if you don't have access to any of those apps. And then I'm on social media on Instagram, and we have a Facebook community.
Wonderful. This has been very delightful. Thanks so much for coming on. I always ask a last question. What are you grateful for today specifically or this week, Angela?
Right now, the first thing that pops into my head, I'm just so grateful for my little ones that are 3 and 7. And we had a whole day of watching Halloween movies and snuggling yesterday in pajamas. So I'm grateful for them.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on here, Angela. I love learning more and more from your podcast, and this has been delightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation and maybe got a bit curious about Ayurveda. Make sure to check out Angela's website at simpleayurveda.com and also check out the show notes at sarasanacroce.com/GBR68, where you find the link to take her free modern day dosha quiz. Also, Angela gracefully shares a 15% off discount with all my listeners. So this applies to any of her courses or memberships, and I'm part of her monthly membership and absolutely recommended. You can use the coupon code GentleBusiness15. So again, this applies to all her courses that you find on simpleayurveda.com. Also, if your intuition tells you that now is the time to join the Gentle Business Circle, our monthly explorations of gentle marketing, then don't miss our first circle call this year, which is coming up on January 13th. And there's now a good 20 or so people in our little gentle marketer group. You can sign up at sarahsanacroce.com/circle and choose the monthly price that feels good to you and suits your current budget. Next Friday, I'm back with a solo episode about how the world sees you. So let's be the change we want to see in the world. Speak to you soon.